The Imperial Palace of the Dracovon Empire was one of the most impressive structures in the known galaxy. It sat on the highest point of the planet Valethos, carved out of black stone that shimmered like the surface of a dark sea under the twin moons. Every corridor was wide enough for a full-grown dragon to walk through without folding its wings, and the ceilings stretched so high that the tops of them were lost in shadow. It was a place built for power, for ceremony, and for the kind of quiet dignity that comes with ruling 43-star systems. But on this particular morning, the palace was not quiet. It was not dignified. It was, in the most polite terms possible, a complete mess. Empress Valethra stood in the center of the Imperial Council chamber with her arms folded and her long silver tail twitching slowly behind her. She was tall, even for a Dracovon, and her scales caught the light in deep shades of violet and blue. She looked every bit the ruler of an empire. Except for the small black scorch mark on the hem of her ceremonial robe, which had not been there an hour ago. The 3 hatchlings were the reason for the scorch mark. They were also the reason the council chamber now smelled faintly of smoke, why 2 of the decorative banners had been chewed through at the bottom, and why Senior Advisor Kethron was standing near the far wall with his 4 arms crossed very tightly over his chest, refusing to look in the direction of the nursery wing. The hatchlings had names. The smallest one, a compact little creature with dark scales and a tendency to breathe blue fire at completely random moments, was called Smolder. The biggest one, who had teeth that could cut clean through starship-grade titanium and seemed to know it, was called Fong. And the third one, a pale silver dragonling who had the unsettling habit of phasing in and out of physical existence without any warning, was called Wisp. They were, by any measure, extremely impressive baby dragons. They were also, by any measure, completely impossible to manage. The Empress had tried everything. She had hired the most qualified caregivers from 11 different alien species across the galaxy. The Kethari had come first, 7 feet tall and known across the stars for their unbreakable composure. They had lasted 4 hours. When they left, the lead caregiver had simply said, in a very calm voice, that she was retiring effective immediately and wished the Empress well. The Zenvari had come next, empathic jellyfish beings whose whole culture was built around staying peaceful and centered. They had been found in the corner of the nursery room, all 6 of them, vibrating quietly and unable to form sentences. It had taken their medical team 3 days to sort them out. After that, the Empress had run out of species willing to try. Kethron cleared his throat from across the room. He was the most senior advisor in the Imperial Court, a reptilian being with pale green scales, 3 centuries of diplomatic experience, and a very strong preference for problems that could be solved with paperwork. The hatchlings were not a paperwork problem, and this distressed him greatly. He said, in his most careful voice, that there was one more option. The Empress looked at him. He explained that the human diplomatic liaison, a man named Caldutton, had submitted a formal request 2 days ago to suggest a solution. He had apparently been waiting politely for the right moment to bring it up. The Empress had met Caldutton. He was a human, which meant he was short, soft, and entirely without natural armor of any kind. He was also, she had to admit, unusually calm for a being with so many obvious physical disadvantages. She asked what his suggestion was. Kethron paused, looked at his notes, and then said that Cal was proposing to bring in a human family. Specifically, his younger sister, her husband, and their infant daughter. The Empress stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the scorch mark on her robe. Then she looked back at Kethron. She said, quietly, that she would hear what Caldutton had to say. Cal was brought in within the hour. He was a lean man in his early 30s with an easy way of standing and the kind of steady eyes that did not flinch when a baby dragon sneezed a jet of blue flame 6 inches from his left shoe. He had worked in the Galactic Diplomatic Service for 8 years and had spent most of that time quietly making himself useful in situations that other people found overwhelming. He was good at those situations. He did not entirely know why. He explained his idea simply. His sister Donna and her husband Pete had a 10-month-old daughter named Lily. Lily, he said, was very good with creatures. He said it the same way someone might mention that they had remembered to bring an umbrella. Calm. Factual. No performance. Kethron asked, with visible skepticism, how a human infant was supposed to manage 3 Imperial hatchlings when 11 professional alien caregiving teams had failed. Cal thought about it for a moment and then said that he wasn't sure Lily would manage them exactly. He said she would just be around them. And that, in his experience, was usually enough. The Empress did not fully understand what that meant. But she approved the request. She was tired, the hatchlings had just destroyed a 3rd decorative banner, and she was running out of robes without scorch marks on them. Cal stepped out of the chamber and made a call back to Earth. Donna Nolan had packed for the trip the same way she packed for everything, practically, quickly, and with the calm efficiency of someone who had stopped being surprised by life a long time ago. Her bag had diapers, a change of clothes for Lily, 2 spare outfits for herself in case of spills, 3 of Lily's favorite teething toys, a small blanket that smelled like home, and 2 granola bars for Pete, because Pete always forgot to eat when he was nervous, and he was definitely going to be nervous. Pete Nolan was, in fact, nervous. He was a quiet man, the kind who built furniture in his garage on weekends and made very good coffee and did not say a great deal unless he had something worth saying. He had been to 11 countries on Earth for work and had once talked his way out of a difficult situation in a port city using only hand gestures and a very firm tone of voice. He was not, generally speaking, easily rattled. But he had never been to an alien imperial palace before. And when the transport ship broke through the upper atmosphere of Velthos and he saw the black stone towers rising out of the mountain below them, catching the light of 2 moons and glittering like something out of a dream, he reached over and held Donna's hand without saying anything. Donna squeezed his hand once and then went back to making sure Lily's carrier straps were properly adjusted. Lily Nolan was 10 months old. She had big brown eyes, a small amount of dark hair that went in several directions at once, and a plastic teething ring shaped like a giraffe that she had been chewing on for most of the journey. She was not concerned about the 2 moons or the glittering towers or the fact that the transport ship was being escorted by a pair of Imperial Dracovon guards in full ceremonial armor. She was focused on the giraffe. Cal met them at the landing platform. He looked, Pete thought, exactly the same as he always did, tidy, composed, and slightly amused by everything around him without being rude about it. He hugged Donna, shook Pete's hand, and then crouched down in front of Lily's carrier and said hello to her in a gentle voice. Lily looked at him very seriously for a moment and then held the giraffe out toward him. Cal said that was a very good giraffe. Lily seemed satisfied with this answer. The palace staff that met them at the main entrance were trying very hard not to stare, and not entirely succeeding. They were used to dignitaries and ambassadors and high-ranking military officials arriving through those doors. They were not used to a human woman in practical boots carrying a baby on her chest while her husband pulled a wheeled bag behind him and looked around at the ceilings with his eyebrows raised. Kethron was waiting for them in the entry hall. He was wearing his full formal attire, which involved a great deal of dark fabric and several decorative pins that indicated his rank. He greeted them with the official imperial welcome, which was a specific sequence of formal words that took about 45 seconds to deliver. Donna thanked him warmly and asked if there was somewhere she could warm up one of Lily's food pouches. Kethron blinked all 4 of his eyes in sequence. Then he turned to a junior staff member and asked them to find a warming unit. They were taken to a briefing room, where a senior Imperial caregiver specialist named Aura presented them with a detailed report on each of the 3 hatchlings. The report included behavioral notes, known triggers, recorded incidents, and a threat assessment chart. It was 40 pages long and had several diagrams. Donna and Pete sat across the table and listened to all of it. Pete took notes on a small paper pad he had brought in his jacket pocket, which several members of the Imperial staff found quietly remarkable. Donna asked a few questions. She asked what time the hatchlings usually got tired. She asked whether they had a preference for warm or cool sleeping temperatures. She asked if Fong had shown any interest in textured objects, because some babies at that developmental stage like things they could press their teeth into. Aura stared at her for a long moment. No one had ever asked him those questions before. He checked his notes and said he would have to look into it. After the briefing, they were led through a long corridor toward the nursery wing. The walls on either side were carved stone with panels of deep blue glass that let in filtered light. It was very beautiful. Pete noticed that 2 of the panels near the nursery entrance had cracks in them, and the edges of the cracks were slightly blackened. He pointed this out to Cal quietly. Cal confirmed, in an equally quiet voice, that yes, Smolder had done that. The nursery chamber itself was large, round, and lined with materials that were, according to Oru, fireproof, impact-resistant, and able to withstand temperatures of up to 4,000 degrees. The floor was covered in soft padding. There were large cushions piled in one corner, and several objects that might have been toys if the toys were built to survive a dragon hatchling's idea of play. Donna set down her bag, took Lily out of the carrier, and sat her on the padded floor. Lily immediately looked around at everything with her usual expression of calm, wide-eyed interest. Pete stood beside Donna and quietly inventoried the room. Then he looked at the reinforced observation window above them, where he could see the silhouettes of at least a dozen Imperial staff pressing forward to watch. He gave them a small, polite wave. Several of them stepped back quickly. Kethron's voice came through a speaker at the side of the room. He said that the hatchlings would be released into the chamber momentarily. He asked if the Nolan family had any final questions before that happened. Donna said they were fine. Pete asked if there was any coffee available. There was a pause. Then Kethron said he would have some sent to the observation deck for them to collect afterward. The door on the far side of the nursery chamber. Smolder came through the door first. She was the smallest of the three, but she moved like she knew that did not matter. Her dark scales caught the light as she slipped through the opening, her low body close to the padded floor, her yellow eyes scanning the room in a slow, deliberate sweep. She had done this before. She knew how rooms reacted to her. People pressed back. People went very still. Some people made small, involuntary sounds and then tried to pretend they hadn't. She found the humans immediately. The two tall ones were standing near the far side of the room, close together, not pressed against the wall. That was mildly interesting. She shifted her gaze down, and found the small one sitting on the floor. Smolder stopped moving. The small one was looking at her. Not in the way things usually looked at Smolder, with the wide eyes and the tight jaw and the whole body trying to decide between staying still and running. This small one was looking at Smolder the way you looked at something that was just very interesting. Her head was tilted slightly to one side. Her mouth was open just a little. She had a plastic object in her hand that she had stopped chewing. From above, through the reinforced observation window, the Imperial staff watched in silence. Fong came through next, faster than Smolder, less careful. She was bigger, heavier, and had not yet learned that subtlety was sometimes useful. She pushed past Smolder and landed in the center of the room with a solid thud that sent a small vibration through the padded floor. She lowered her head and made a sound deep in her throat, a warning sound, the kind she had used to great effect on every previous caregiver who had walked through that door. Pete Nolan, standing just behind Donna, felt the vibration of it through his shoes. He reached up and checked his eyebrows. Still there. Wisp came last, which was her way. She did not use the door. She simply appeared near the left wall, partially transparent, more suggestion than dragon, her pale silver form flickering slightly at the edges. Then she solidified just enough to be fully visible and stood watching, the way Wisp always watched, like she was calculating something. For a moment nobody moved. Then Smolder, still staring at Lily, took one slow step forward. Lily watched Smolder take the step. Then she reached out her hand toward Smolder, fingers spread wide, the way babies reach for things they want to touch. Smolder stopped again. Her tail swayed once behind her. Fong, apparently deciding that the situation was taking too long, leaned forward and blew a jet of hot air toward Pete's face. It was not flame. It was a warning breath, the precursor to something worse. Pete's left eyebrow got singed. Pete reached up, patted his head, checked that his hair was not on fire, and said, in a very calm voice, that he had noted that and asked Fong not to do it again. Fong stared at him. Nobody had ever said that to her before. She pulled her head back slightly. Donna, without making any sudden movements, crouched down to Lily's level. Lily was still reaching toward Smolder. Smolder was now close enough that the reach was almost getting there. Smolder did not move away. Then Smolder did something remarkable. She leaned her head down, very slowly, until Lily's small hand made contact with the top of her snout. The observation deck above went absolutely silent. Kethron gripped the railing with all four hands. Lily grabbed Smolder's snout with both hands. Smolder froze completely. Her yellow eyes went very wide. No one had grabbed her before. Things either ran from her or tried to carefully avoid her. They did not grab her. They certainly did not grab her with both hands and then make a long, happy sound like a small human child who had found something that delighted her. From up on the observation deck, the imperial linguist Voss, who had spent 40 years studying Dracovon communication, leaned forward and squinted at Smolder. Smolder's face was doing something he had never recorded before. It was not aggression. It was not territorial display. It was something much harder to classify. He wrote in his notes that it appeared to be confusion. Pleasant confusion. Wisp chose this moment to act. She phased completely out of existence and reappeared directly in front of Lily's face, close enough that her nose was inches away. It was her most reliable technique. Things that she materialized in front of always reacted badly. They flinched, or screamed, or stumbled backward. It created a very satisfying chaos. Lily looked at Wisp. Wisp's pale silver face hovered inches from hers. Lily looked at the faintly glowing eyes, the translucent scales, the small wisps of silver light at the edges of Wisp's form. Lily blew a raspberry. It was a spectacular raspberry. Wet. Enthusiastic. A small bubble of drool followed it into the air and popped. Wisp did not move for 3 full seconds. Then Smolder made a sound. It came from low in her chest, and it was not a warning sound and it was not a territorial sound. Voss, still watching from above, wrote in increasingly excited handwriting that he did not have a category for this sound. It was something the Dracovon species was not known to produce in any recorded observation. It was, as best as he could describe it, the closest thing to a giggle that a dragon was physically capable of making. Fong turned to look at Smolder. Smolder was still making the sound. Fong looked at Lily. Lily was still sitting on the floor, perfectly content, now reaching toward Wisp again. Fong sat down heavily on her haunches and tilted her enormous head to one side, staring. Pete leaned close to Donna and said, very quietly, that he thought it was going okay. Donna said she thought so too. The afternoon passed the way good afternoons do, slowly, warmly, and with the kind of small moments that you do not notice are important until much later. Donna settled into the nursery the same way she settled into most places, without fuss, without ceremony, just by finding what needed to be done and doing it. She had brought a small cloth bag with her, and from it she produced a soft folded blanket, 2 of Lily's board books, a container of puffed rice snacks, and a packet of wet wipes. She arranged these things on the corner of the padded floor and made herself comfortable. The observation deck above was still full. The Imperial staff had not left. If anything, a few more people had arrived. Aura the sleep specialist was there, pressed near the front. Voss the linguist had 3 notebooks open. Kethron stood at the back with his arms folded, watching with the careful expression of a being trying very hard not to form a conclusion before he had enough evidence. In the nursery below, the hatchlings were figuring out what Pete Nolan was for. Smolder had discovered it first, by accident. She had crept up behind Pete while he was looking at one of the scorch marks on the wall and had huffed a small puff of warm air near his left ear. Pete had made a surprised sound and spun around. Smolder had frozen, staring at him. Then Pete had said, in a flat voice, that she had done that on purpose and she should know that he had been very startled. Smolder tilted her head. Pete crossed his arms. Smolder huffed another tiny puff of air, this time near his right ear. Pete yelped, spun right, realized there was nothing there, and turned back to find Smolder watching him with her yellow eyes half closed in an expression that even a non-expert could identify as deeply satisfied. Pete pointed at her and said that was not funny. Then he went back to examining the wall. Smolder waited 45 seconds and did it again. This continued for a while. Pete tried several approaches. He tried ignoring her, which Smolder found uninteresting and responded to by escalating. He tried warning her before she could act, turning around preemptively, which Smolder found so surprising that she made the chest sound again, the low, rolling almost giggle that Voss was now scrambling to record from multiple angles. Finally, Pete tried the exaggerated feint. Smolder puffed air near his ear, Pete grabbed his chest, declared he had been mortally startled, and did a slow dramatic collapse onto the padded floor. Smolder walked around him in a complete circle. Sniffed him. Looked at his face. Puffed a tiny flame into the air above him like a question mark. Pete opened one eye, looked at the flame, closed it again. Smolder made the sound again, longer this time, and then flopped down next to him on the floor like a cat who had decided that this particular spot of sunlight was hers now. On the observation deck, 2 junior members of the Imperial staff had to be quietly reminded that this was a professional setting and that covering their mouths to suppress laughter was not sufficient. Fong, meanwhile, had found Lily's teething ring. Lily had dropped it, as Lily often did, and it had rolled across the padded floor and come to a stop near Fong's front foot. Fong had looked at it for a while. Then she had poked it with one claw. Then she had picked it up in her enormous titanium cutting teeth, incredibly gently, and carried it back to Lily. Lily made a sound of pure relief, reached up, and took it back. Then she dropped it again. Fong retrieved it again. This happened 6 times. On the 7th time, Lily held it out toward Fong instead of immediately chewing on it. Fong looked at it. Looked at Lily. Took it carefully. Lily reached for it. Fong moved it slightly to the left. Lily reached left. Fong moved it right. Lily made a sound of mild protest. Fong dropped the ring into Lily's lap. Lily laughed. It was a baby laugh, short and sudden and very loud, and it rang off the padded walls of the nursery and filled the room completely. Fong jerked her head back slightly in surprise. Smolder opened her eyes from across the room. Wisp, who had been drifting near the ceiling in a half-material state, suddenly solidified and dropped to the floor with a soft thud. They all looked at Lily. Lily laughed again, because Fong's startled face was apparently the best thing she had ever seen. Voss wrote in his notebook, in very small and careful writing, that he was reconsidering several previously published conclusions about Dracovon emotional range. Donna, watching all of this from her corner, had been humming. It was something she did without thinking, an old song from before either she or Pete had been born, something slow and easy that her mother used to hum when she was moving around the house. She had been doing it while she refolded the blanket, and she kept doing it without paying attention to it. Fong had gone still. Donna noticed this and kept humming. Fong took 3 heavy steps toward her and then stopped. Donna did not look up or change what she was doing. Fong took 2 more steps. Then she lowered herself onto the pile of silk cushions in the corner, very slowly, rearranging them with her nose until they suited her, and let out a long breath. Oru, watching from above, pressed both hands to the glass. Fong was asleep in 11 minutes. It was the fastest the largest hatchling had gone to sleep since she had hatched. Oru had 17 methods in his files, 2 of which required specialist equipment, and none of them had achieved 11 minutes. Donna kept humming. She did not know she had done something remarkable. She was just humming. Wisp, who had been watching Lily with increasing curiosity for the past hour, finally made her move. She phased to half-transparency and drifted over, reappearing next to Lily in a sitting position, her pale legs folded underneath her, her silver scales catching the light. Lily looked at her. Wisp looked at Lily. Lily reached out and patted Wisp on the top of the head. Wisp's eyes went wide. Lily patted her again. Wisp leaned into it. By the time the late afternoon light was coming golden through the blue glass panels, the nursery was quiet. Lily had fallen asleep on the padded mat, her breathing slow and even, one fist curled near her face. Smolder was draped over Lily's feet like a living blanket, glowing faintly with warmth. Wisp had curled against Lily's back, partially material, her edges soft. Fong slept in the cushioned nest in the corner, snoring small rings of smoke up toward the ceiling. Pete was sitting against the wall with his arms resting on his knees, looking at all of it. He had not said anything for a while. Donna came and sat beside him and they looked together at the 3 sleeping dragons and the sleeping baby. Pete said, quietly, that he was going to need a minute. Donna said she understood. Above them, the observation deck was completely silent. Kethron stood at the glass and looked down at the nursery floor for a long time without speaking. Then he said, in a voice that was more careful and less certain than his usual voice, that he was not sure he had the right words for what he had just watched. Cal, standing beside him, said that was probably fine. He said some things did not need a lot of words. The Empress met with Donna and Pete the following morning in a receiving room that was smaller and less formal than the council chamber. It had wide windows that looked out over the mountainside below the palace, and the light came in warm and pale in the early hours. There were chairs at a low table, and someone had put a small cushioned mat on the floor for Lily without being asked. Lily was sitting on the mat, eating puffed rice snacks one by one with great concentration. Empress Babysitter sat across from Donna and Pete. She was not in ceremonial robes. She was wearing something simpler, dark and close-fitting, and her tail was still, which in a Dracovon meant something closer to calm than her usual meetings produced. She had a cup of something warm in front of her that she had not touched. She looked, Pete thought, like someone who had slept better than they had in a long time. She asked Donna, without preamble, what the secret had been. Donna thought about it. She was quiet for a moment in the honest way, the way of someone who was actually thinking rather than performing thought. Then she said she didn't believe there was a secret exactly. She said that Lily was 10 months old, and at 10 months old a baby has not yet learned to worry about whether something is supposed to be scary. Lily had looked at Smolder and Fong and Wisp and seen 3 small creatures that were warm and interesting and right there in front of her. She had not performed calm. She had not been trained in composure. She had simply responded to what was actually in front of her, which was 3 young creatures who were, if you thought about it from the outside, just as new to the world as she was. Pete added that he thought the dragons had probably never had anyone treat them like regular young animals before. Not dangerous ones. Not terrifying ones. Just young animals that were figuring things out. He said he thought Smolder especially had seemed a little surprised by it. Like she had been waiting for someone to flinch and nobody did. The Empress listened to all of this. She looked at Lily on the mat, who had finished the snacks and was now looking toward the door with an expression that suggested she had heard something on the other side of it. The door opened slightly. Smolder's snout appeared in the gap. Lily made a sound of greeting that was not a word but was unmistakably welcoming. Smolder pushed the door open further and came inside. She crossed the room in a low, quiet walk and settled herself next to Lily's mat without ceremony. Lily immediately reached over and put her hand on Smolder's back. Smolder made the chest sound, the almost giggle, soft and low. No one at the table said anything for a moment. Then the Empress said she would like to propose an arrangement. That she was careful and precise about it, the way she was careful and precise about everything that mattered. She said she understood that the Nolan family had lives and work and a home on Earth, and she was not asking them to give those things up. What she was proposing was a schedule. 3 days each week, Donna and Pete would bring Lily to the palace for what would officially be called interspecies socialization sessions and what would, practically speaking, be time spent in the nursery with the hatchlings. They would be compensated well. They would have access to transport, accommodations, and anything else they needed. The imperial palace would make it as straightforward as possible. She paused and then said, with honesty that was clearly not something she had planned to include, that her hatchlings had been struggling. She said that the first months of life for Dracovon young were important for the kind of growth that went beyond the physical, and her 3 had been kept in a kind of isolation because no one could manage them. She said she had been worried about them. She said it simply, not as an empress but as a parent who had not known what to do. Donna said she understood. She looked at Pete. Pete looked at Donna. Pete said they would talk it over properly and give an answer within a day, but that his gut feeling was yes. Donna said her gut feeling was also yes. The Empress picked up the cup in front of her for the first time and held it with both hands. She said that was good to hear. Across the room, Lily had somehow acquired Fong's ceremonial name band, a heavy piece of carved metal that imperial hatchlings wore on formal occasions. She was trying to put it on Smolder's head. Smolder was sitting very still and allowing this. Fong was watching from the doorway with an expression that suggested she was not entirely sure how to feel about it. Cal, who had come into the room quietly during the conversation and was standing near the window, watched this and did not say anything. He thought about the briefing he had given to the council 2 days ago, the calm way he had explained that humans were strange with young creatures. He thought about how that had sounded like a small, practical thing when he said it had not turned out to be a small thing. The formal arrangement was signed 2 days later in a ceremony that was considerably more dignified than anything the nursery wing had witnessed in recent months. Cal received a commendation from the Empress, which was written in formal Dracovon script on a material that was not quite paper and not quite metal, and which he later had framed and put on the wall of his office. Next to it he hung a photograph that Donna sent him, Lily and Smolder asleep together on the padded floor of the nursery, Smolder's wing draped over Lily like a canopy, both of them looking entirely at peace. Word moved through the galactic community the way word always moved, which was faster than anyone planned and further than anyone expected. The story of the 3 Imperial hatchlings who had driven off 11 caregiving teams from across the known galaxy, and had then spent a quiet afternoon being charmed by a human baby, traveled from diplomatic channel to social relay to casual conversation across dozens of worlds. A Kethari philosopher wrote a short piece about it. It was careful and precise and asked several serious questions about what composed instinct meant and whether the absence of learned fear was itself a kind of wisdom. A Zenvari poet wrote something much longer and considerably harder to summarize, but it was widely shared, and its central image of a small hand reaching toward a thing that everyone else had run from stayed in circulation for years. I and the Imperial nursery, on a morning several weeks later, Lily sat on the familiar padded floor with Wisp on her left and Smolder on her right and Fong stretched out in front of her like a very large, very warm rug. Lily was babbling. It was not words yet. It was the sound of someone practicing the shapes that words would eventually take, trying out rhythms and sounds and repetitions, completely absorbed in the project of it. Wisp was listening. She had her head tilted to one side, and her pale eyes were bright and focused. She looked, Donna thought from across the room, like she was hearing something important. Like the babbling contained information that was worth tracking very carefully. Donna watched the 4 of them for a while. Then she thought, not for the first time, that she should probably start thinking about what it meant that Lily's closest companions at this stage of her development were 3 Imperial Dracovon hatchlings who were the heirs to a 43-system empire. She thought about what that might mean for Lily's expectations about the world and the creatures in it. She decided that was a problem for a later version of herself to work out. Cal stood in the doorway behind her and looked at the nursery floor and felt, quietly and without any need to say it out loud, that humanity had done a great many remarkable things since it had found its way to the stars. It had built ships that could cross the distance between worlds. It had learned languages that had no sounds a human mouth could make. It had formed agreements with beings so different from itself that the agreements should, by any reasonable logic, have been impossible. But this, he thought, watching Lily pat Wisp on the head while Fong snored a slow smoke ring toward the ceiling, this might be his favorite one,